I've read your bio, but I'd like you to tell me a little bit about when you started playing violin.
Well, I started playing the violin at the age of 5. My mother was taking my brother for violin lessons because he was a handful, and she thought if I get him something to do, maybe he won't get in as much trouble as he's getting in. He was only 3.
Oh, he was younger than you.
Yes, he was, and it was just when Suzuki method was coming to the fore in this country, and we were lucky to live near this a convent where a nun had started teaching the method, and she had been going to all the workshops, and wonderful person who is still alive today. So she said, well, what about the little girl? Why not have her take? And my mother said, well, I just hadn't thought of it. And this is the story. So thankfully she said, what about the little girl?
Oh, nice.
Because that was, then it happened.
And why did your parents choose violin for your brother?
It was just, they were parents paying attention to what was out there for their kids, and they read about it and they wanted to be a part. My mother was musical, but she had never had formal training, so she could play the piano, and she had favorite pieces like Claire de Lune, that Debussy that she would play at home, and she liked to play Burt Bacharach and things like that. So she was musical.
We have very similar backgrounds.
Really?
Yes, because my older sister, she's 3.5 years older. At age 6, and I was 3, we moved to Parsons, Kansas, and Norma Jean Seaton went to and studied with Dr. Suzuki, and she was one of the first programs that she started in Parsons, Kansas, a very small town in Southeast Kansas. And I begged to play when my sister did, because I had to do everything big sister did. I was so jealous. But my parents were like, no, let's wait a little while, So they let me start 2 years. I was 5 too, as well.
Okay.
And it was much easier for me than my sister, because I'd heard her lessons, and my mother was a complete Suzuki mother. She practiced with us at the piano every day. She played some piano and went to every lesson. Is your brother still playing violin?
My brother no longer plays. I mean, he has the violin somewhere, but he doesn't play. My sister, who I have a younger sister, is also a professional violinist.
Oh, and where does she live?
She lives in Florida at this time.
Yeah, that's excellent. Do you play a lot together?
We went, there were years there when we played in a quartet together for a lot of, in the summer festivals we would do. And then we went our separate ways. She got married and moved to Norway, actually. And
wow.
She was playing in Bergen for a while.
Did you have strings in the public schools?
Yes, we did. We were, I think a lot of schools had strings, many at that time, but fortunately, we were blessed with a music director, a director of the orchestra programs of our public school, which is a western suburb of Chicago. Her name is Dorothy Kunkel, and just an incredibly gifted person, and inspiring and full of energy. And she discovered that there was a 3rd grader that was a pretty good violin player already. And so when I was in 3rd grade, I used to have to take the early bus to the junior high, and I started playing in the junior high orchestra when I was in 3rd grade.
This is another thing we have very much in common.
Okay. Well.
In 3rd grade, they were like, you got to read music. And the high school, I was in a much smaller town than you.
Right.
So in the high school and the elementary school I went to were on the same street, and I got out of elementary street and was sent to play in the high school orchestra. Yes.
And actually, you learn. I mean, I did not know how to read.
Neither did I.
And you sit there and you just listen, and if the quicker you could get to respond to what you were hearing. Miss Kunkel was, she helped me, she turned me on to Interlaken. So I went to Interlaken as a young person to the camp for 5 summers, and ended up at the academy for a couple of years too. So,
so you've had quite a distinguished career in the Minnesota Orchestra, 22 years, right?
Yes.
And did you start as assistant concertmaster?
I did.
Was that your first job?
No, it wasn't my first job. I had gone to Juilliard to get a master's, so it was the spring. I had just graduated, and I took 2 auditions. One was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, because my family had a home near Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun to, just to live there and enjoy the Lake Michigan and all of that. And then I also took St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. They were both section jobs, and I got the Grand Rapids one, and I didn't get the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. So I spent a year living in Michigan and playing in the Grand Rapids Symphony. After a year, I felt like I needed to move, be a little more challenged, and so I decided that in order to get myself to a place, to a different position, I didn't want to just stay in the orchestra. So I stopped playing with Grand Rapids after a year, and I went and took lessons from a very wonderful person in Houston at Rice, Camilla Wicks, and a beautiful violinist, sort of from another era. And she was incredibly interesting. Had her own iconoclastic way of approaching the instrument, which I found it was very stimulating and provocative, really. So I did spend a year there. During that year, I took an audition for the Minnesota Orchestra, and I got that job.
Do you remember the audition?
Yeah, I do. A lot of it.
Like how many people came?
I think there were a lot of people, and I ended up having to play. I think it was 4 times, so over a period of 3 days or so. So it was pretty extensive. And I also remember I had played as a soloist with Grand Rapids Symphony. The audition was on a Sunday, so I played a Friday night. I played Prokofiev Concerto, and then I played Saturday night, and I had to get up at the crack of dawn. It was very cold. It was January, and I had to take a plane and right from the airport to the first round of the audition.
Wow. Yeah. Was it blind from the beginning?
It was blind for most of it, but I think the last round was not blind.
When did you decide you wanted to be an orchestral player?
Well, because I had gone to Interlochen as a young person, I had been exposed to orchestral repertoire from a pretty early age. I love the repertoire. It's incredible. It's some of the most amazing masterpieces from Western culture are orchestral pieces. Just the feat of putting together those kind of numbers and diversity of instruments, and what happens is astounding and moving.
How do you see the future of the American orchestra?
I tend to think that it's a cyclical thing, and that there will be some changes in the way things are done. One has to believe that there will be a respect for the history of our cultural heritage. I can't imagine the world without orchestras giving people the opportunity to immerse themselves in that way. There have been some sticky situations lately, but then again, I think there's difficulties in many facets of our economy,
Exactly.
and so I don't think it's fair to just. I think if you look at the big picture, you'll see that there's issues that need to be resolved, and it's not just
In the arts.
Isolated in the arts.
Right. So what attracts you to new music?
It expands your awareness, your psyche, the muscle of your brain, and your emotional palette. The curiosity of what other humans are creating is really the bottom line. I mean, it complements. I mean, everything you've played, everything that is written now, comes out of a lineage of work. So to be part of that progression is just, it's very fulfilling. It's very, it really keeps you alive, vibrant as a performing artist. So
I saw on YouTube something you did with Gamelan.
so that was a Lou Harrison piece. I did do a Cabrillo Festival and got to meet him some years back, and just knowing that there was a gamelan ensemble that was willing to do it in the Twin Cities. So
Great.
you go, and then I get to hear sounds, and then I'm inspired. Can I make sounds that are complementary to that?
What attracts you to teaching, and what's your teaching philosophy?
Teaching, there's a couple things that attract me to it. First of all, I have accrued, or I have gained all this experience of performing, and I feel like my cup is coming full, and then the other thing is just interacting with other people.
Well, we're certainly happy to have you here. We're looking
Pleasure.
forward to the great week.
Thanks.
Thank you.
you.